Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Friend Code. I'm your host, Michael Damiani. This week, I'm joined by Matt Simmons of YoVideoGames. How's it going?
Hey everybody.
And Stealth, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you all?
Pretty excited to have the two of you on to talk about something we have been eagerly anticipating for some time now. I want, yeah, like the trailer's out there. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's confirmed that is the next game coming from Monolith Soft. Yeah, just your reactions to that trailer, what you saw in it. Were you pleased with it? Are you pleased it's 3? Yeah, what are your general feelings right now about this new announcement?
I'll let you go first, Stealth.
Yeah, I guess I can go first. It's funny. When I watched a lot of the reactions to the trailer, at the very beginning, a lot of people thought that it was a Fire Emblem game. And then as soon as the British voice acting hit, and then we saw some of the, army members running across, it became obvious what we were looking at. And once I calmed down and stopped screaming, and I really took a look at the trailer, it was everything I hoped it would be. A combination of everything that we've built up to, really, the huge environments, the music, and of course the release date being as soon as it is. The trailer was a 10 out of 10 for me.
Nice.
Yeah, I was that guy because it wasn't that like, oh, I was convinced. It was just kind of like I didn't, because I wanted it really, really badly for so long. And when I first saw it, I was like, I don't want to like immediately jump to the conclusion. Like, I don't want to be that guy where it's just like there's a really funny moment we had a long time ago during the Game Awards, at YoVideoGames, and Marvel characters showed up in a slightly cel shaded style. And Steve from YoVideoGames got really excited because he was saying that this was way back, in I think 2017, I think December 2017. And he was like, Marvel Infinite's not dead. And so he saw these Marvel characters in a slightly cel shaded style, and he was just like, I told you all. There's definitely going to be more characters coming for Marvel, and it was for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. He got like I didn't want to get bait and switched. I didn't want to get my like super hopes. So weirdly enough, I was like, oh no, is this Fire Emblem? Is it in like? I kind of had that immediate thought, and then I thought almost weirdly for a half second, I was looking at the uniform Noah's playing at the very beginning, and I'm like, that looks like Trials of Cold Steel almost, like slightly a bit with the uniform he had. Then I'm like, wait, a trial? Are they bringing like because there's the one that came out recently in Japan, like Kuro no Kiseki or whatever. And I'm like, no, they're not. And then it quickly hit me, like, of course they're not gonna. That's not their final thing. Like a third party port. Like of course not.
It's interesting because so Stealth thought maybe Fire Emblem, you thought maybe Trails of Cold Steel, and then I thought it was maybe an Atlas thing at first. I was like, oh wait, it's just that's why Atlas was been tweeting about this. I was like, oh okay. I was like DLC maybe, or I don't know.
You bring up a good point because Atlas did sort of tweet like, hey, we're check in, make sure to watch, and I don't remember anything Atlas in the show in the direct actually. And then like that's actually a good point because didn't they have like a fantasy RPG project that just sort of like vanished into the ether at Atlas?
Yeah, they do.
Whatever. Okay.
You aren't imagining
like it's been so long since I heard anything. I think Yoko Taro in a joke was the last time I even heard it brought up.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into the specifics of this trailer and discussion about the third game, I'm giving all our viewers, all our listeners, a big warning right now. Spoilers for any game that has the word Xeno in the title are fair game for this podcast episode. So if you don't want to have anything for Xenogears, Xenoblade games, Xenosaga, you just need to come back at a later date because to allow Stealth and Simmons to have the full breadth of this discussion and not be hamstrung, I need to allow them to be able to talk about whatever they need to talk about for this. So that's your warning. From this point on, you will probably get a spoiler for at least Xenoblade 1 and 2 at the very least in this discussion. So
a lot of gears.
Yeah,
a lot of gears. I'm just gonna point that out there. Like there's a lot of gear spoiler talk that can go into this.
Yeah. And
so if you're like, hey, I want to jump in at the very beginning, I don't want anything spoiled for Xenogears, I'm just gonna tell you right now, there's a lot of Gears talk that I could probably bring up.
All right, so there's your fair warning. I'm gonna let this discussion be guided by the patrons because the patrons submitted a lot of great questions, pretty much covering all the topics I can think of. So we're going to start with our first question from Swordfish. With the announcement and the release date of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, do you think anyone can jump right into this game having never played the first 2 games?
Yeah, I'll start. I think you can, but will you get the most out of it? No. Obviously they're going to make an RPG that can be played by anyone, but to get the most out of it, you're going to want to play and have beaten Xenoblade Chronicles 1 to probably Torna. And it is a big time commitment. So this is definitely not the kind of sequel that, is far removed from the games that came before it. You're going to want to play the originals.
Yeah, Takahashi said in his statement that, he's making the game, for both, people who have or haven't. Yeah. I think the best way to look at this is like, you can look at this like an Avengers film. You probably don't need to have seen, all the Marvel movies in whatever phase leading up to whatever Avengers movie, phase 1, 2, 3 or whatever. Right. And frankly, I still didn't see all the all the Marvel films. I did not watch every single MCU film. I didn't do it even when it led up to Infinity War and Endgame. And I still enjoyed Infinity War and Endgame. So I think it's definitely kind of in that sort of same vein of like, okay, you're probably going to be able to enjoy this, pretty well without having played 1, 2, but you are going to be missing out on a lot of, I don't want to say context, but like impact. I think the impact will be greater if you have the knowledge of 1 and 2 going into it. And there's a lot of that just in the trailer where like a good example would be like the not the opening shot, but the second shot, after, the flute and then it pans to the army running. That's like a very much direct reference to the very opening cutscene of Xenoblade 1. And you can look at it as someone who knows nothing like, wow, whoa, this looks crazy and cool. Like, weird sci-fi, war going on. And it's still exciting and interesting. But if you played Xenoblade 1 and, you've even seen the first cutscene there, you're like, whoa, this is a direct callback. So it's like, it kind of like, you get a little bit more impact out of just that one tiny little thing. And I think that's kind of like probably how the rest of the game is going to go. I do want to say, though, if you're interested in playing the games, they are big games, they are big commitments. If you do get the Torna DLC for 2, which there's only one thing, there's one thing of DLC for Xenoblade 2. There's no like piecemeal or this or that or other thing. You just buy one thing and it gets you everything. It gets you all of Torna and all the goodies that go into Xenoblade 2. And you get a really cool customization slider for the difficulty. And then Xenoblade Definitive Edition has a casual mode. And they really like, you can actually really like downplay like the difficulty on those games. And if you just want to kind of like enjoy them and run through them in a quick, breezy fashion, both Definitive Edition and the DLC for Xenoblade 2 offer that ability to really just kind of like, you can really kind of like breeze through the games. I mean, you're still going to deal with like 10 to 13 hours of cutscenes in each, but you can, there are things built into 1 and 2 to get you up to speed. If you don't want to like, I don't have the time to commit to like, grinding it out and leveling up. Don't worry. There are some really great difficulty options, especially with 2's DLC and casual mode and definitive, where you can really just breeze right through them. We have no idea what, if anything, about X will be important. My guess is probably not that important. There'll probably be some really obscure Easter egg stuff. Who knows? But you could probably get away with ignoring X, if you're worried about, having the full, Xenoblade, a library in your brain going into 3. So
let me ask you both this. I'm going to start with Stealth. Do you think they might include some kind of like recap at the beginning of Xenoblade 3 if they're going to lean so heavily into this being a follow-up?
I think they should. And, speaking of, the Legend of Heroes Trail series, Switch owners, and NAS America started with 3 for Switch, which left out big chunks of content from 1 and 2, which were PlayStation exclusive. So what they did was they basically added like an encyclopedia. This is where the story is now, to kind of catch people up. not perfect by any means, because it's like you're starting, you know, at page 500 of a 1,000-page book. You're going to be a little lost. But you know, I think it would be a good idea to have an encyclopedia. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Xenosaga 3 had an encyclopedia of sorts, of, you know, terms and things like that, and themes. So yeah, I think it's a good idea if they do it. I think they should, especially because there's going to be a lot of people who aren't gonna, you know, come into the game with 500 hours of experience, you know, of the series. They're gonna need a refresher, and they haven't replayed the game. You know, they haven't replayed 2 since 2017, and you know, they haven't played Xenoblade since, you know, the Wii. They might not have gotten Definitive Edition. So you know, I think just to make sure we're all on an even playing field, it would be a good idea to have just an encyclopedia of characters and terms and things like that.
It wouldn't be unprecedented either for Monolith Soft, because when Xenosaga 2 released, there was a movie, a recap DVD movie of Xenosaga 1 to catch people up to speed for 2, even though 2 sold way less than 1. And in Europe, only Xenosaga 2 was the only game that came out in Europe. And then, of course, with the same thing with 3. But 3 is an interesting story for Xenosaga. So the development of Xenosaga is really, like, troublesome. And the technical story in Xenosaga 3 is based more off of the Nintendo DS version of Xenosaga 1 and 2, which never got translated or localized. So it was almost necessary to have like an extra encyclopedia in Xenosaga 3, since like it was technically following up the DS version, and the story changes from there going into Xenosaga 3. So it wouldn't be unprecedented for them to do that. And I kind of wonder, it's actually a little bit of a kind of a bold new world, because we're in spoiler mode, I guess, whatever. There was no, in fact, there were straight up lies about Xenoblade 2 being connected to 1. He famously at E3 was just like, you know, this is not connected to the first game. It's a different universe. And I'm like, okay, you're maybe technically right, but you're still lying. Like, so that was actually kind of, it was fun, but you didn't learn that until like, you know, the 11th hour. So it wasn't necessarily important. It was just sort of like, oh, cool. Here's an explanation that sort of ties it into part 1. But this is like from the get-go, it's like, no, this is the follow-up to 1 and 2. So this is not like, hey, it's the whole game, you know, and then at the end we have some weird, crazy revelation that teases you that, hey, it's connected in some way. I want to say maybe if they don't have it in game, I almost could see Nintendo making like a website, like a little encyclopedia, their own little official wiki, you know, for 1 and 2 to catch you up to speed. I almost can see that happening.
Could be part of the special edition, maybe like a bonus pre-order for people like that. Include like a nice like recap movie or something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really curious if they're going to offer a special edition that has all 3 games. I'm really curious if they're going to do that, because I think like they could.
Well, what would you want that packaging to be? I think you have something in mind of what that packaging would be, because there's something with 3 in that series that
it could look like the Trinity processor, or it could look like the Zohar / conduit.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it would probably, if the conduit does show up again in 3, which would be that's a big lore question, but like yeah, it's very interesting, because I could see them going probably with a Zohar, like a big Zohar. You open it up and has like all 3 games in it in some way or fashion. So it's interesting though, because like all the special editions for every territory have all been like different packaging wise, and sometimes a lot of times just different content, like slight variations. So I'm actually very curious to see, because I assume there will be a special edition. I think that's kind of like goes without saying, but I'm curious if there's going to be a big box edition that has, you know, has all the games. And I actually think that'll be a very, I mean, this is more of a financial thing, but it's like, I think that'd be very smart on Nintendo's part to do that. Because it's like, you could sell it, and you can sell it for a lot of money. You can sell $150, $200 or whatever, and people will pay it. You can charge whatever you want, you know, to go Jurassic Park quoting. But like, yeah, like I think it would be very smart to do that, because now that the whole world's aware that they're connected, It would kind of be like a really cool thing if they just like, here's everything. You don't have to download this and then download that, or you don't have to like go and like, make a, fill up your shopping cart on the eShop or whatever. It's just like, here's an all-in-one bundle. I think it would do well for them. And I think it would be good for the overall series, just recognition wise. So
yeah, at the very least, do like a huge discount on the eShop for, everything, make it enticing.
Yeah. It's hard to say because Nintendo never lowers their price on anything. They
do sales, but like, you mean like maybe a permanent price slash or a temporary one for the period of the release window, Stealth?
Yeah, I mean they don't discount Xenoblade games often. Like they do discount during Black Friday and pretty much the whole Q4, but it's usually never the Xeno games. But yeah, I'm just talking about like a proper Xeno promotion to get people excited about the new games, kind of thing. Just those two games.
They still offer the voucher program in Japan, and in fact, one of the voice actors, I think it was Uni's voice actress, the Japanese one, or maybe Senna's voice actress. She recently tweeted how she used the voucher system to buy 1 and 2. So you can still buy in Japan. You can actually still get those Nintendo voucher tickets, and you can buy Xenoblade 1 and 2 for $100.
So maybe do like a Xenoblade voucher here, like specifically just for that. Like if you buy like Xenoblade 3, you get 1 and 2 or something. If you pay like this, I don't know.
I think over the summer, like if they did that in June or July or something, and just said, hey, we're offering a Xenoblade voucher. Get 1 and 2 for $99.99. It's not a lot off, but it's a little bit off. It's $20.
Yeah. So, and doing it that far in advance, to the lead up would be like the right time to do it and have it just through the release window. I think that would be smart. Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. It's kind of a transition to the next question, but one thing that could be in the deluxe edition could be the flute that we see so prominently in the trailer. And this question comes from Tommy about the flute. With flutes being a major factor in the story, do you think there'll be a rhythm minigame or maybe even a rhythm element to combat? Or just how is the flute going to play into a mechanic in this game? Or do you think it's just going to be strictly a story element?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the flute is basically part of the jobs of the two main characters on the opposing factions. And we see it a lot in the trailer and how it's used in kind of like a Final Fantasy X kind of, way where they're honoring the dead. In terms of the battle system, Monolith Soft does tend to change things up, from like series to series a little bit. So like, I don't think it's going to be exactly like 1 and 2. And yeah, I mean, I could see them kind of bringing in, rhythm timed elements, not like Paper Mario per se, but something with, time button presses, like in rhythm. I could definitely see that.
Sure. Yeah. Simmons, do you think there'll be any kind of rhythm element to the gameplay?
No.
Okay.
Here's why. They are very big on their story, and I imagine like let's pretend it's like Zelda style, right? You have a flute and you can play the flute yourself. Like I can't imagine Monolith Soft or others being like, okay, it's a serious cutscene. You're supposed to play the flute for to honor the fallen, and someone sits there and plays like the Beverly Hills Cop theme or the Simpsons theme, or something like that, instead of actually doing what they're supposed to in the cutscene. Also, a lot of this music was recorded on real instruments, so they're not just a ton of the music in the game was done by a professional flute and pianist. Get it out of your system now. It's like Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra, Anunya Irish Choir, Bratislava Symphony Choir. Like a lot of like real live instrumentation was gone into this. So I almost can't imagine. I just see that and think, okay, well, it's not MIDI software based or kind of like, how, the older Zelda titles were done. So I almost kind of, I just
tougher to manipulate like real time. You're saying like if it was like
I think if it does exist, it will be in the battle system, and they haven't shown anything on the battle system, which leads me to think that maybe there's something there to it there. I could see rhythm being part of the battle system, absolutely. But as far as like say cutscenes or like an added gameplay element, I kind of don't, because they've been very particular about going after like, you know, the spared no expense, you know, aspect of the music for this game. And you know, a lot of it, what looks like a lot of its budget and allocation went into getting real life instruments, big performers, like, you know, professional players. So I don't think there's going to be like, say, like a flute mechanic where you sit there and, let me play the song of my people element to the game. I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong on that.
Sure. No, it's a good argument. It's a good argument.
I'm just kind of thinking over the fact that I'm like, there's so much of it that's live instrumentation that I'm just kind of like, I kind of think they're going to want to just keep it very much like a sort of more guided, experience, when it comes to musical stuff like that. But it is an interesting question. It does raise some interesting possibilities, especially for
I just want to say I don't think it's going to be like Zelda, with being able to just play songs and do things like that, or having a quick time event where you have to play something very quickly. If it's going to happen, it's going to be in the battle system if there's anything. But even then, like, there might not be music associated with it. You might just see like Noah like with the flute to his mouth, and you're just putting something in, and there might not be like a musical accompaniment kind of thing.
So let me ask you both this. Stealthy could start with the first answer here. It comes from patron Alex, because both of you kept mentioning possibly the battle system. So let's just go to the battle system right now. What do you think the combat will be like in Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Will it be more or less complicated than 2's battle system? And do you think the series could benefit from a more streamlined battle system? And they gave Final Fantasy Remake's battle system as an example of being more streamlined.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be less complicated. It might just be different in what they in the meters and the kinds of things that they do. I like Xenoblade Chronicles 2's battle system more than the first. I don't know if that's like an unpopular opinion. I like the complexity it had, and building up to the chain combos. I found that all very satisfying. So I hope they keep some of that, but like, we haven't seen anything on the battle system yet, so I don't want to speculate and then be completely wrong. But the thing is we have characters, we have like races and beings from both games in this game. So a theory that I've seen people float are, is the one faction going to have the gameplay like the first game, and the second faction is going to have the gameplay like the second game, and then eventually is it going to be something completely different? I've seen all kinds of theories like that, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be less complicated. That doesn't seem to be Monolith Soft's style.
Yeah, I think if you go from a sort of like release order timeline, like from Xenoblade 1 X to it got more complicated. They didn't get less. Torna was actually a little bit different, where it kind of scaled back a little bit, because Torna's a smaller project. You don't have the blade system in Torna, so like you're stuck with who you got, kind of thing. Interestingly enough, they kind of hinted at a little bit some vague what could be in the battle system in the Japanese Twitter, the official Xenoblade Japanese Twitter, where they kind of talked about certain characters' battle prowess a bit, and it's kind of interesting how like Mio is like a, weirdly enough, like sort of a tank or an aggro drawer, they kind of said in the Twitter. So it's kind of interesting, like what they're saying doesn't really point towards anything in particular, but it does kind of seem like, oh, they were kind of getting a little tiny bit more detail oriented on their roles and battles and stuff. So, and some of it you can just kind of tell, like Lands, the Machina soldier, he has the sword, the big giant sword, and he has the shield thing he uses in the trailer, stuff like that. So we kind of got a little bit hint of that. I think if you want to try to look at it as Final Fantasy 7 Remake, that's a bit apples to oranges, because to me, 7 Remake is just a real-time combat. And Xenoblade is not real-time combat. It happens on field, but it's not real-time combat in any. It's still like that MMO light style of thing.
And sorry, the one thing I also wanted to mention, and the one change we see from going from Xenoblade 2 to 3, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 had 3 characters in your party. It looks like in 3 we have 4 characters in the party at one time. So that could also, change, how battles go.
Which X had 4 characters. You could have 4 characters in a party in X. So yeah, it's interesting how like we don't know. I feel like they're hiding something a bit with the combat, this because there was just specifically nothing about it in the trailer whatsoever. So I feel like they're intentionally holding it back because there's something about it that's going to be different. I think the only thing they really should do though is there's something they did fix with Torna was to have an like a sort of encyclopedia, a callback to instructions, because they tell you how things work once in Xenoblade 2 and then it is gone.
Yeah.
Now, if I feel like if you understand, because here, like one of the biggest misconceptions about 2 is that like, oh, it's a gacha game. You need to have good. No, you don't. You can dominate that game with the characters you're given. Just the characters you get automatically. You can dominate the game really hard with like the jobber, class pulls that you get. Like people have taken out like the biggest enemy in the entire game in under 2 minutes with 2 characters. Like they didn't even have a full party. They just showed you, hey, like how you manipulate it, but it is complex. That's kind of its problem, is that it's a bit of a wrestling a bear a bit to try to figure out how all the mechanics in 2 work, and they only tell you at once. So YouTube becomes your best friend when it comes to instructions.
Yep.
On how to figure out what you should be doing.
I will say that was my problem with 2. I just for whatever reason did not click with me, and it was gone. And hopefully they learn that lesson. It sounds like whether or not they keep it as complex is different. I hope they learn that lesson, because having to go outside of the game to learn how to display the basics was the lowest point for me in that game. But otherwise, once I got over that hurdle and it clicked, I'm like, man, if you just gotten me to this point in game, like I would have had a much better time in the start. So it just kind of soured me a little bit.
It's one of those things where it's like when you know how the battle system's what you're supposed to be doing in Xenoblade 2, you do not like going back to 1. Like Definitive Edition was kind of a revelation of like how kind of like stale the battle system is in 1 compared to 2. Once you know
I still
what
enjoy
you're doing.
1.
Like I
like positional stuff. Like
one is a race to DPS. That's all it is. It's just a race to DPS.
I kind of like that stuff.
Race to that. do the chain attack and just do reds. Just it's actually, to me, it's like it's kind of boring just because it's a lot of waiting on cooldowns and stuff. And then there's even tricks in 2 where it's just like if you keep flicking up with Rex, like he'll actually build meter super fast. So there's like all these little like tricks to like supercharge your meter build for super moves or just for arts in 1, or I'm sorry, in 2. There's a lot of complexity to it, but like man, going back to Definitive, it was just kind of like, gosh, it's not bad, but like it's very much just sort of it's a DPS race. That's all it is. Like I really miss the orbs, because like to me 2's the way I simplify 2's battle system is it's like building a Jenga tower so you can kick it over, because you build up these elemental orbs, by doing these combos, which end in a certain element. So you get all these different elements up there. Then you do a chain attack. And when you do the chain attack, you have this extra thing you're trying to do, which is break the elemental orbs. And then you do that and you get like, 9 million damage on it. It's just like, yes, like it has like this really satisfying, like I'm building everything up. I'm putting all this stuff on the enemy so then I can initiate my super attack and break all of it and just cause massive damage multipliers on the enemy. It's really fun. It's really enjoyable once you know what you're doing. But like there's no defense for the tutorial too, because again they tell you it once in a text. They put the text on screen once and then it's gone forever. So
yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like, I think I was like 25 hours in when I felt like I got it. And it shouldn't take that long to feel like you have a grasp of the battle system, but it's super, but I can't go back to 1. It felt so button mashy to me after going back to the Definitive Edition. It wasn't nearly as satisfying, where I think there's a lot more, strategic elements to 2. in terms of building up, the right elements and making sure that, you're ready to burst at the right time. I don't really want to go back to the first one.
Yeah, and there's a lot of customization in how you want, because you build a team up. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot like, say, Marvel versus Capcom 2, but not as broken, where it kind of is as broken. But there's all these different teams you can use, because you can put all the different, because all the blades have different weapons and different elements, and that can drastically alter how any given battle can go. And there's so much freedom and customization. And two, once you understand it, and one is like, you have the one character and this is their assigned role, which kind of looks like what 3 is doing a bit, because it doesn't look like we have a blade system. We don't know how weapons will work necessarily. It looks like weapons are kind of set to the character, from all accounts, from what it looks like. So it could be a little bit more like Torna in that sense, or maybe even 1 where it's just kind of like, this is your character, this is their set role, this is kind of it. Like, we don't necessarily have the crazy customization of 2.
Oh yeah. Let me just ask you this: like, do you think, real quick, do you think you'll be able to change their appearance with gear, like one style, or do you think they'd stay more 2?
Oh, fashion souling?
Well, I'm just you're talking about like battle system with gear, like, and no one actually asked this question to the patrons. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. Like, I like that a little bit about 1 because I like
loved
that. So I hope they do bring it back personally.
I think it's gonna be a compromise, because in the trailer we actually see multiple different costumes on the characters. So I'm thinking there will be different outfits, but there's not gonna be a lot of different outfits. This is kind of the way I'm thinking. I'm like, they'll maybe be like, their battle gear, and then maybe sort of like a super casual relax, and then like the sort of their normal gear. But I'm gonna say probably not, because again, it kind of goes back to like, well, they're using a guest artist, same artist from 2. Generally speaking, character designer artists, especially guest artists, don't like it when it's like, hey, I draw this character up for you, and then like the character runs around, in a goofy looking bikini or whatever the whole time. So that's where I'm kind of like, well, probably not. But on the other hand, again, though, we do see various outfits worn by some of the characters in the trailer, Uni and Noah especially. So I'm like, I think there will be more, because like 2 was like, there was kind of like the 1, and then they later added DLC with that color swaps, and then they later added swimsuits. And then spoilers, like Rex finally gets like an upgraded costume way late in the game, but there wasn't really any costume changes in 2 really. But I think 3 will have some, but
Okay.
not like 1. Not like 1. I don't think it's going to have, but I could be wrong on that. I could be completely wrong on that, but just my gut instinct is like, there'll be some, but not a ton.
Yeah, I think they're going to save the swimsuit DLC until the expansion pass. That sells it for some people.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I agree. We do see Noah change costumes once in the trailer. So clearly, and whether that's like story driven or whether you can buy costumes, we don't really know yet. But I do think, obviously, it's a JRPG. There's going to be armor. There's going to be weapon upgrades. But whether that shows on the character, we don't know a ton yet. I think there's going to be some, but it's not going to be like this crazy customization thing like maybe Tekken is, where you can do whatever you want and make the characters look crazy. I don't think they're going to do that. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit more muted, and whatever costumes they have will be saved for either free or paid DLC.
That probably makes the most sense. Let me. We talked a little bit about the battle system and a little bit about gear here. And this next question from Undercover Sheikah is about exploration, which is one of my personal favorite things in Xenoblade games. So let me start this question with you, Stealth. In what ways do you think Xenoblade 3 will evolve exploration? In the trailer, we see the party travel by boat. Do you think we will be able to use many different vehicles?
Many different vehicles? I'm not sure. I think the big question is, will we be able to use mechs?
Yeah.
Will we be able to fly around and battle with them and do crazy things? And I think the answer might be yes. I want it to be yes. Where, either the mechs are in gameplay or in travel. I really liked the way Xenoblade and Xenoblade 2 had it, where you can find like special areas. Like if you explore enough, you'll find like really like great vistas.
Yeah.
I like that, and I like where you can just explore and then you get landmarks, and you can warp to them. I hope all that stuff stays because it worked really well. There's no reason to change it. But yeah, I think the fact that we do see like a vehicle, is kind of hinting, and we see mechs in the trailer. I think they're going to have a bigger part than they did. That's what I'm hoping for. But yeah, in terms of the exploration, I liked how Xenoblade 2 had it.
Yeah, Takahashi's a big self-proclaimed Gundam fan, and it's been obvious if you've been following him since
Yeah.
Gears. So part of me feels like he always wants to have that. He always wants to go back to that, which is interesting because like 1 and 2 don't have any mech travel per se. I predicted from the very beginning, before this anything was ever known about this game, I'm like, I think they're going to go back to mechs. My prediction is we're going to go back to that, and I still think it might be true. I think the most interesting aspect of it is the fact that when we do see the water gameplay, both the boat and the swimming, it kind of sort of implies that we're not going to be walking around on top of big titans that are kind of very separated from each other. The big question, I think, if mech travel is in it or not in it, really, I think depends on how the world map is designed. And is it kind of more like X, where everything is like there's an ocean and then you have land masses on top of it, and it's all just kind of like a spread out surface? Because 2 did the thing where it's like, okay, there's just loading zones, like you're on this titan, you're on that titan, you're on this titan. 1's more or less the same way. You do have loading zones between the different parts of the Bionis and Mechonis. So yeah, I'm gonna say probably yes, because we do see a lot of giant mechs just kind of laying around. They're called Iron Titans, by the way, as the Japanese Twitter has revealed. And apparently people live in colonies on these Iron Titans. And they say some of them are for building up warfare, and some are just for producing stuff. So yeah, they actually said there was many. Like I think they even might have been, one of the translations was like dozens. So it's like, it's interesting in a sense that there's going to be little mini Iron Titans that people kind of live and have colonies on throughout the game. And I do think it's eventually going to lead to mechs. I think my gut is like eventually at some point there will be. I think depending on how they divvy up the map system. Is it more like X, where it's one just here's this big giant overworld, or is it more like 1 and 2 with it's just big zones? So I think that's the deciding factor, really, is how they're handling map integration, whether or not they'll want to. Because if you have a mech, you don't want a mech that can't fly.
Yeah.
You get a mech, you want to fly in that mech, and if you fly in that mech, you're definitely gonna be going as high as you can, and breaking some boundaries as far as like world map stuff goes. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of like, it kind of really depends on how they're going about the design of the world map in general. Like that'll kind of be our real tell-all whether or not they'll be there. But my gut, I still lean yes.
What I think mechs will. I want to answer this myself. I do think mechs are gonna be in here. I also think like possibly like obviously I don't think it's the only part of combat, but I think there will be mech combat at points in this game as well, which is something they probably are waiting to see. As to your thing about flight, though, one way they could solve that is this earlier, like how other games do it, is that you can't fly at first in your mech. It's like a thing you get later, or like it's a reward. The Xenoblade games have been about Xenoblade 1 and to extent 2 have been about you need to actually traverse the environments, and X as well, to unlock checkpoints and warp points. Sorry, warp points is the correct term. before you can do fast travel. So like it could be something as simple as once you've explored an entire region, even if they do like the seamless X kind of map, once you've explored a whole type of a portion of a region, you unlock flight in that area. But like if you go to his map part where you haven't explored all of it yet, they're like, no, we want you to actually take in the minutia, like the flora and the fauna of this, and really appreciate the work we put into this world design. Whereas if you have flight at the beginning, people are just gonna like zoom around and like not really appreciate the world. So that's something I think would be very late game if they're gonna do some kind of flight. But I would not be surprised because I mean they're showing you a boat in here and exploring the ocean, so I think they do have that. And I'm also curious whether or not it's gonna be some kind of like not like a thing that you evolve over time, not just for like flight, but like I'm thinking to games like Skies of Arcadia, or like even like games that have like player housing, where maybe the vehicle is like your kind of core hub thing where you keep going back to, and you can do like certain operations and actions from there. And you know, maybe you put like, because in in one, when we were rebuilding not colony, was it Colony 6, sorry, or what was the colony you rebuild in one? The
6 and this colony 6 and 9 are the two
the one that you do all like the quests for, and it keeps developing. Like it could be something like that, like a Terrytown in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, and X had a base, had your barracks, and they did the same thing where like they gated the mech was, first of all, just the mech alone was gated to a certain point in the game, and then the flight module was like like you had to have been everywhere. Like they did not let you fly in X until you had definitely seen the entire world map. So I would never assume that if there was going to be playable mechs with flight capabilities, that's definitely going to be late game. Absolutely, 100%. There will be mechs in the game. The question is whether or not do we get to walk around in them and control them. That's the real question.
Fighting them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see them. We're definitely going to fight them. But are we ever going to jump in when a pilot one? I still lean yes on that.
All right. This next question from Kerbu is about the Future Connected extra content in Definitive Edition. They'd love to know what the panel thinks looking back on Future Connected and how that could tie into Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The dimension monsters that made a mess of things in that expansion could maybe hint some big bads to come. They want to give us a refresher. Here's what director Takahashi had to say about Future Connected. Future Connected focuses on the character and story of Melia after the events of the main scenario comes to a close. So they ask why Melia and not Fiora, Rain, Dunban, Charlotte, or Ricky. Well, that's because this scenario isn't simply a new story to be told, but a way stone of sorts pointing towards the future. The events that take place and the words spoken by the characters in Future Connected are linked to the future of Xenoblade Chronicles itself. It's our hope at Monolith that as you experience this new scenario, you'll enjoy dreaming of what sort of future that might be. To all of you who have been with us since the Xenoblade series began, and to those of you starting your journey with us, we hope the possibilities for the future of Xenoblade Chronicles inspire you as you play. So Takahashi's words there implying that this was, Future Connected was supposed to be important. So for those who may have played and are still confused, how do you see that linking possibly to 3?
Yeah, certainly when they developed Future Connected, Monolith Soft knew that Melia was going to play a big part in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. They knew that. And when I was playing Future Connected, Takahashi said, this kind of hints, and it might have been a mistranslation, that it kind of hints at the future of the series. But when you play it, it really doesn't. It's really more of a continuation of Xenoblade. And then at the very end, the final boss is something completely different. And then they kind of tease, where that boss came from. It's not really like super like wink to me. Like I didn't get the connection all that much. But certainly the reason why Melia was chosen, I think, is because like Melia is a main character in Xenoblade 3. I think we can all say that to be true. So that's why they used her rather than Fiora or, a buddy adventure with Shulk and Rhine. Why it was Melia specifically. But yeah, like it doesn't like I don't think Future Connected leads in story wise necessarily. Maybe it does. I just don't see it. But the fact that Melly is in it, is kind of speaks for itself.
So that quote was in the art book that came with the special edition of the game, which I read before I played Future Connect, and it drove me nuts the whole time playing Future Connect, like trying to like hyperanalyze everything. And I tweeted this out a little like whatever, however long ago, after the reveal. There's a heart to heart because in 2 they started voicing the heart to hearts, and then in Future Connect the heart to hearts are voiced as well. The quiet moments, whatever they're called. The very last one that you unlock is with Melia in Alchemoth, and you go up to the mural where it shows the engraving of the Bios and Makana stabbing each other. And Melia is sitting there and she's fretting, and Shulk's talking to her, and she's like, I have this premonition, this vision of the future to come afterwards. It's like, I see war, and I see like all this hardship, and I'm just like, you go back and you're like, oh, yeah. Like they actually are talking about 3 actually in the quiet moment, the heart to heart between Shulk and Melia at the very end of Future Connect. So it is weird because like, but it also kind of makes sense how like it really doesn't do any of this weird sort of like Marvel style, like, post credits, like dun, 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 like, look who shows up, there's no like Thanos going, fine, I'll do it myself moment of Future Connect. And the characters have no idea what's going on because Shulk still has no idea, how his universe, he has like a vague concept of how his universe was created. And again, yeah, the Fog King you fight, and then the Rift and everything. I saw the Rift and I'm like, okay, that looks pretty similar to some other stuff, but like I kept expecting there to be more with it, but there wasn't. And I'm like, that's fine, because I guess if you really put too much stuff in Future Connect, then people who didn't play 2 would be really lost as to maybe some of the reveals coming from it. But yes, like to really get into with the meat of Future Connect is that the Fog King is an infernal Guldo from 2, and it's a creature you fight in a place called Moritha, which is spoiler, it's Earth. It's like it's a human, like a Gildo is a human who survived the phase transition experiment, but they basically, their body got deformed and morphed over time, and they basically just like, it's just like a soul clinging to life. And you fight one of them in there's a bunch of them in Xenoblade 2. You can fight like just small ones, and then there's a big one you fight in the Torna Womb, which is a big boss battle in Xenoblade 2. And they sort of reveal later on, like, yeah, this was a human at one point, and then after Klaus initiated his phase transition experiment, like there were some survivors, and they were clinging to life, but they were all horribly mutated by his shenanigans. And the Fog King is that. Like it's interesting because that character model doesn't exist obviously anywhere in Xenoblade 1 because they hadn't created it 2 yet. But then when they brought in Future Connect, it's like the final boss, it doesn't say anything, it doesn't talk because they don't in Xenoblade 2, but like the enemy character, the enemy model they used for the Fog King was this thing. And if you look into so what's the biography or what is the history of this enemy from 2 that they're using for Future Connect, and it's like starts to sort of like add up. Also going into Xenosaga stuff, the whole thing with the Fog King is interesting because it exists on the sort of like ethereal plane, and like they can't physically touch it or damage it at all, and it corrupts stuff around it. And Shulk has to make a makeshift Monado, which is called like the Rex Monado, by the way, and he has to create a Hilbert effect, which is what Cosmos does in Xenosaga. So it's kind of like this weird sort of like things are all kind of like going in this weird loop cycle of like, okay, so now Xenoblade has created the Gnosis from Xenosaga, and you have to do the exact same thing to make an ethereal ghostly apparatus physical, and and then so you can actually take it out. And then like, what is this thing and where did it come from? Well, it came from Xenoblade 2's world. It doesn't state that, but I think it's sort of like, it's very implied. Everything's sort of really implied with Future Connect. It's kind of like they don't ever outright say, they don't say what the rift is, they don't say where it came from, they don't say where it leads to, and you just kind of have to infer it because of the creature that comes out of it, and what the history of that creature that comes out of it is. So I think Future Connect's going to make a lot more sense after Xenoblade 3's out than now. Like it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't do that very Marvel's cinematic universe style thing of like teasing you with like some big reveal or some like, oh my gosh, this this special character showed up for like half a second at the the last cutscene. So it doesn't really do that. It's a lot more subdued. So
yeah, I mean, it's the same way with Xenoblade 1 going into 2. You don't really know how they connect in Xenoblade 2 until like the final moments of the game where, okay, now I see how this is all connected. But that's very different in Xenoblade 3, how it's, the whole point of the story is these two worlds combining. Like it's not just implied, it's there.
Yeah, and like, was it Shunya Takahashi literally just states it after the trailer.
Yeah.
That was, to me, was kind of like, okay, so like Nintendo, Nintendo exec is sitting here saying it publicly, like this is a connection of 1 and 2. All right, no more ambiguity.
Yeah, they even wanted you like to think like, oh, you're clearly seeing 2 things from 1 and 2 in one shot together. You wait, stay tuned to find out more information. Like they're definitely leaning very hard into that, and I think you're right. Like whether or not it was planned for a while, or whether or not through the development of 3, they just were like, we need to figure out how Future Connected fits in. Like you're right, it'll make way more sense once we played it. Like
it's really bizarre because Takahashi said they had planned 3 before 2. Like when they were finishing up X, he said they had planned where they were going to go with the story in 2 and 3 before they were making 2.
I mean, that's kind of good to have, is knowing like how many things have so many media, how many pieces of media have like multiple entries, and they're great. The journey's great, but they never stick the landing. I think they probably really wanted to get it right, or they had set themselves up for the best chance to succeed narratively with that finale. Like Marvel, as you said, like MCU stuff, like earlier, is like one of the few things that really most people, I'd say, nails it. So that's not, yeah. But for me, it'll be very curious to see whether or not it was like, oh, they clearly were planning, even just future connected stuff. This is all part of a grand plan, or it'll make way more sense. Let me ask you this. It's from Level Capybara. You were all talking about Switch collections, Xenoblade collections, the 3 games, but they want to know the Switch is about to receive its 3rd Xenoblade title to date. Why not make it 4? Remember Xenoblade Chronicles X?
No.
Now, Takahashi previously mentioned that money and tech limitations were both obstacles to porting Xenoblade Chronicles X to the Switch, but do you think it's possible for 3 to perform so well that a Switch X port becomes a more tantalizing prospect for Monolith Soft?
Look, if Nintendo and Monolith Soft wanted to do it, they would do it. It's not like Nintendo is so hard up for money where it's so cost prohibitive, which is the reason that Namco gave why we haven't gotten the Xenosaga trilogy, that it's too cost prohibitive. If Nintendo wanted to do it, I think they would do it. What I've always gotten the impression of, Monolith are kind of control freaks, and if it was to happen, they would have to do it. Like they wouldn't let anyone else touch it and do it. They wouldn't give it to another studio to do it. And I think they've been pretty busy with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 like for years. And, I think that's what they've been really focusing on. And they splintered their teams, to work on Definitive Edition. But even Takahashi said, like, as they were working on Definitive Edition, they were also working on this mystery project, which I think we can all safely assume is 3 now. So I think they've been busy. I think like the money excuse was them just trying to cover up the fact that they've been working on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And I don't think they're the kind of team that would just like give it to Grezzo or give it to, the studio that's doing Front Mission for Square Enix.
Hey, Monster Games did 3DS Xenoblade. It happened.
Yeah, it's true. They did. I would think that they would want to do it to make changes to it. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I'm sorry, because I do want it to happen.
It's not going to happen, and let me be a little realistic here on kind of why. And some of it's like it's like, I'm not saying it's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Of course, they could do it, but here's why it's probably never going to happen. Number one is there is a metric ton of gamepad integrated functionality with Xenoblade X. Yes, you could play the game on gamepad only, but it was a very cumbersome experience. But much of the game is very much based around using the gamepad in tandem, because there's a whole sim-like aspect with the world map, and because you go around, you plant these nodes, and then like you have all this mining operation and all this touchscreen based, stuff to manage on the gamepad while you're playing the main game in X. So there is a ton of gamepad functionality that they would have to scrap and then make doable without it completely. It's doable, but it's not simple. It's not like Mario 3D World, well, we can kind of just like use a little bit of gyro, to like sort of like supplement the very few times you needed to really use the touchscreen or something like that. It's not like New Super Mario Brothers U in any way, shape, or form either. So there's that. And then there's the other aspect, and that is when everyone forgets, Xenoblade X was an always online experience. It was meant to be always online. If you weren't online, it would literally have a little faded out thing that says, with a big X, that says offline. A ton of online features were built into the core of the Xenoblade X experience. There's factions that you join up with. There's daily quests. There's daily stuff. You can do, hire an NP, like hire an AI of another player character. There is actual co-op missions that you play with other human beings. There is a ton of online integrated features into Xenoblade X, and all of that would have to be massively redone because it's not the same system. They don't have the same online infrastructure for the Switch as they did for the Wii U. Remember, they went back to friend codes on the Switch, as one thing, and then all the other little things. Like, you would have to get someone who's a network infrastructure. You'd have to get like online programmers and network infrastructure people. And I've been saying, for years now, ever since like even 2017, I was like, they're not hiring online infrastructure people. Like, that's been in none of their. They've almost tripled in size since Xenoblade 2 came out, and none of it was for online infrastructure people. So there's, I mean, that you could say, well, they're already there. They made Xenoblade X, but it's like maybe. But on the other hand, it's just kind of like they've not been looking for this. This has not been something they've wanted, and it's a very big part of Xenoblade X. And again, it's a difficult game to port because it really tried to do everything. It was the kitchen sink of game design philosophy there, where try to do as much stuff as they could with the gamepad, and then try to do all this stuff with their big online stuff and Miiverse and whatever, and all that stuff that Nintendo was kind of pushing at the time of the Wii U, and kind of gave up on. So it's the worst selling Xenoblade game. I get it. It's a Wii U title. But it's also a game that seemingly, I only say seemingly because I think things could change by the end of this year, but seemingly has no relevance to 1 and 2 and now 3, how 1, 2, 3 are very intricately connected, and X kind of just exists in its own little side bubble universe. So it's not like you're as far as we can tell, we're not missing any major story content or beats from X, in 1, 2, and 3. And it's a very difficult game to you're going to have to rework it. And that's a lot of time and a lot of effort for a game that may or may not even do all that well. The Switch is getting very long in the tooth at this point too. Like, you'd have to think about, okay, even if they were doing an export, it's going to come out 6-7 years after the Switch came out. How much of an audience is left that's going to want to jump into a big game like that with all these online, features and co-op and all this other stuff? It's just kind of like the best hope really is to see like a remaster on a future generation of hardware. I don't think Switch is a good fit right now at this point in time for X or for the studio.
Yeah, they might revisit X if they ever decide to, do a sequel to it. I could see that. But like right now, I think the focus for them was like getting this trilogy all on one platform because it's one story, really. So I think that's what the focus was. That's why we got like definitive edition when everyone was like, "Hey, how come they're not porting? How come they're not porting the Wii U game? Because like Switch has all these great Wii U ports." And people were like, "Hey, how come they're not doing that? How come they're going back to the Wii game?" It's because they want people to have access to this complete story. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. It seemed pretty obvious they were doing that. And then I know Monolith is Monolith Soft. They're not like they're not just like the other Nintendo studios where it seems to be the general MO just that permeates throughout Nintendo is just like they'd rather not revisit older games and move forward with newer projects. Like, new games are more valuable to them. And we have Xenoblade 3 coming out this year, and we saw that the other project that's they've been hiring for that like we've seen nothing tangible of yet as well. That
I'm fairly certain that's being saved for a hardware upgrade.
Yeah, like I'd rather see that, and them have resources more allocated to that than it possibly being. I mean, obviously it'd be like probably the core Xenoblade team, but I'd rather you make a brand new type of game after 3. If there's that 3 is maybe like the conclusion to this trilogy and there's nowhere to go after that, then revisiting X for all the reasons you gave Simmons and the fact that it is, there was probably like a reason it was like the lowest selling one as well. It had like has seen like a really cool ideas, but like the more appealing aspects of everything kind of like felt like kind of seeped into like 1, 2, or into 2 since it came out after, and then like now 3, like the potential of like a more seamless world map. Like, oh, that's really all I wanted from X, kind of like to come out of there, and maybe mech traversing and mech combat. It's like, cool, I got those, and like I'm not really clamoring for online functionality for Xenoblade Chronicles right now either, as you pointed out. So it's like it would be such a tall order, as you said, and like what would the payoff even been? And yeah, like that game was really pushing the Wii U. I don't see how it could look very much more appealing than it would already on current Switch hardware. Like you said, a hardware refresh would be a better opportunity. As you said, Stealth, if they wanted to maybe continue that as a trilogy, then sure, revisit on next Switch hardware where a more apparent generational leap in graphic fidelity would benefit that game. But yeah, it keeps coming up. I know people want like export. We get it, but never say never. But as you said, Stealth doesn't seem like it's likely anytime soon. And also you pointed out, because this next question is actually, you kind of answered it, but maybe we could explore it a little bit more for a second from Zach. They just want to know Xenosaga Trilogy Remaster when. You pointed out Bandai Namco with the funding. The money answer was more apparent to them, but with the, depending on where 3 goes, there might be a resurgence in interest in the saga. Could you even see like Nintendo maybe working with them to make it like maybe Nintendo exclusive ports of those with some like co-funding or some co-work there?
Yeah, Namco and the Switch is a very complicated relationship where, to put it very nicely, where like they'll port games like 3 years after the fact. And the fact in a couple months we're getting, Dot Hack on Switch, which came out in 2017 on PS4. So they're no stranger to like the late port, but for whatever reason, I think it was Harada who said like they did like the cost analysis and it went very far into almost like being an active project, but then like financially they ran the numbers and they didn't want to do it, and they didn't do it.
I'm very happy with that tweet Harada made, because he said he said it actually made it to the remaster phase, but it failed in a profitable market analysis. He says, sorry, this is going to be difficult to bring up with the board again, kind of thing. I was just happy. It's not what you want to hear, but I'm happy he was transparent. I really appreciated that transparency.
Do I believe that report now? I don't think so, because a lot of people want these games. And I think if you, in the right context, in a direct announcement, you announce these games, a lot of people are very happy, and they sell better than, any of the other, they sell at least 1 million. I think a remaster collection could sell 1 million units, in the right context. And I think it would sell very well, given the fact that Xenoblades is popular. It was really, Xeno is as popular as it's ever been. Certainly more popular than they were during Xenosaga. So, I think whenever they do it would be a good time for it. It's just like, are they ever going to do it? And the fact that, Monolith Soft was once owned by Namco, and they weren't happy with that relationship, and then they went to Nintendo. You don't know what kind of feelings exist. I know they collaborated on some of the, like Namco had to sign off on some of the DLC that was in Xenoblade 2, but like how much involvement do you want Monolith Soft to have? And yeah, like would it have to, like would they want it to be Nintendo exclusive? There's just a lot of things.
Is another
There's a lot of things.
I think to consider.
It's the same thing with Gears actually.
I was gonna ask you about, that was my last question I was gonna ask you about, is like Gears also always comes up, and like again with 3, like the resurgence in popularity for that.
Yeah,
and even 2D HD like effort people have been throwing around.
Square doesn't need Monolith Soft to do it if they want. They own the IP. They can do whatever they want with the IP. And Namco owns Xenosaga. They can do whatever they want with the IP. They don't need Monolith Soft to actually do a port or a remaster. They don't need to. But a big part of game development, you know, in the early stages is me and Max, we've talked about it a lot, is what gets these projects going is someone within the company is a champion for them. You need a champion for a project. You need a producer level person who's like, I think we should do this. I really want to do this. I'm going to champion this and push for this to get made. And I don't think there's anyone at Squaresoft who's a champion for Xenogears, wanting to really like go ahead and like make a big push to get like a 2D HD or a port or anything for it, because it almost would feel almost like stepping on toes a bit at this point, where it's like Monolith exists. They're actually doing very well for themselves. It's almost kind of like, you know, taking their, you know, trying to profit off their previous work for them. I almost wonder if it was more of a that's why I kind of think Square's never done anything with Gears as far as like ports or remasters or anything, just because I'm like, I don't think there's anyone within Squaresoft that's like wants to do that. Like there's no champion for Gears at Square, because anyone who would be a champion's at Monolith Soft.
That's actually a really good point, because Square Enix has like a champion of like Saga, the Saga.
I was going to bring up the Saga creator, because he has tenure, and apparently he's basically like allowed every X amount of years to do a new Saga game or port or something. He's just allowed to do it because he has so much tenure there at the company. That's why we keep seeing it kind of like brought up every so often. But it's like, I just don't think there's anyone like that within Squaresoft for Gears. And then Saga is the same kind of boat where Harada tried, you know, he brought it up and they said, we don't think it's going to sell. I think Saga's a really double-edged sword, because it plays nothing like Blade. And you might get people interested because of the success of Blade, but they're going to quickly find out the games are nothing alike from a gameplay standpoint. So I think that's going to be the biggest problem. Also, good God, they would have to redub those games, especially 2, if they were going to remaster them, because like the voice actors change almost on a per game basis, and the dubbing job in 3 is pretty dang good actually. And there's a lot of like well-known talent that stepped in for the roles in Xenosaga 3, but 2 is a train wreck as far as like dubbing goes, and 1's pretty bad too. And it's like, man, I don't know, like like I almost feel like there's more work that needs to be done for those. And
you could take like a crowdfunding approach for it, maybe like
but that always looks, and then that looks bad when you're Namco and you have that much money at your disposal.
Yeah, I mean, that was more like Harada's report, like, oh, you reached this goal, like we'll do a whole new dub. But I think it would be more likely that Nintendo, like, they see the interest and like they actually like their analysts are like, hey, there actually is a surge in like trending topics for Xenosaga. Maybe let's reach out to the Bandai Namco and ask like, hey, can we see some of those analysis you did on the HD effort, and like maybe we could have ours look at it, and maybe there is something to be worked out there. As well. The Gears thing, though, you said, I'm very interested because I understand like your argument about not having a champion there, but there is a dedicated team at Square Enix that is dedicated to the remasters, like their old catalog, bringing it back. And it does seem like it's been a little like scattershot in what they bring. Like all of a sudden, ActRaiser comes out of nowhere. It's like, okay, why ActRaiser? Why now? Even Chrono Cross, like why now? Why is it coming out right now? Like why this year? Like why not a previous year? And like it could, like honestly, I actually in an Easy Allies podcast, I kind of postulated the theory that you just did. Like, well, they probably have a team. Like, all right, who's interested in what? What do you want to do? And someone raised their hand like Chrono Cross. I'm like, all right, are you really passionate about it? Let's do that. Like, and I can see maybe, yes, sure. Like, no one there is like Xenogears, and as you said, they don't want to step on toes. But I'm also want to say like never say never. I feel like the break of the current Monolith Soft team that was at Square Soft at the time was so long ago that maybe they buried the hatchet and there are no hard feelings. That
it was pre-merger, it was before.
So maybe like there's a possibility there, and like as I was trying to say earlier, I've seen a lot of discussion recently about the hopes and dreams of people for the 2D HD team to maybe take a crack at it, like a game that might fit really well and the spectacle. Because how many times have we had breadcrumbs that people thought was like, oh, Xenogears remaster is coming, or they're putting out a new mech figure or soundtrack or whatever, and it's like, wait, why are they touching Xenogears but not the game, but they're touching merchandise around it? Why would you even do that? And it's like, I don't know. I think it could happen. It's just a lot of things would have to fall into place, as you said.
You're right. Nothing's impossible. I would never discount it. I just would say like it's a little unlikely at this point.
I think a big part of like what Square is deciding to bring up, and I think they're enamored with this whole it was never released in English before, and now we're bringing it out in English. I think maybe why Chrono Cross is happening and why Live Alive is happening, and why even Dragon Quest 3, the original like kind of we got like a Game Boy Color version, but it wasn't like kind of how it's looking now. They're very enamored with this concept. It's their own doing of not bringing games over.
It kind of works in a way. It's like, hey, it's basically a new game.
Yeah,
like we don't have to. Well, like it's like it's a good sell. It's not like, hey, here's this old obscure thing. When you talk about something like it's like very muted. I feel like say Nintendo's like, we're bringing Earthbound to the NSO. Great. It's like it's been on Wii U, it's been on Wii, it's been very, I'm just going to bring it up. It's been very easily piratable for years. But then you have to talk about something like Live Alive. I don't even know if there was a fan translation ever done for that or not, but Square doesn't have to sit there and say like, well, hey, we're going to resell you this old thing that's like, hey, freely available on the interwebs, to pirate. Now it's like a brand new thing. It's like this is new. You've never experienced this, and then especially if they 2D HD it. Radical Dreamers another big one where it's like this is a Teleview game.
That one makes me think if they went to the effort to even bring Radical Dreamers over and officially localize it, it's like I see anything is probably possible if they really want to do it.
And that's why I feel like if they ever did like a Xenogears, you would need Monolith Soft to like redo the second disc, like add the content they were going to add to make it that kind of enticing thing.
I think that second disc is probably a big hang up for a remaster of Gears, because it's like it's very obvious if you're going to put any effort into doing this game, like the second disc is very obviously like this weird sort of sore spot of like, we totally ran out of time and budget, so we turned it into a visual novel. We just tell you about things that happen, and instead of you actually going somewhere and doing things, and it's like you're gonna make that playable now, right? Like I feel like there's a big expectation with Gears, like to flesh out the second disc if you're going to actually go through the effort of remastering the game in any way. So maybe in this paper, that might just be why Square doesn't want to do it, because like, that's work. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think people were more forgiving then. I don't think they'd be as forgiving now of like a second half that's that loose. You can't just add like no random encounters and the normal quality of life updates for these remasters. You'd have to do something a little bit more substantial, and for that, I think you don't need Monolith Soft, but I think like the fans would kind of want Monolith Soft to do it.
Especially if you're fleshing it out, and it was such a personal story between Takahashi and Soryasaga, so it's like,
and that runs into, and if that's the way they want to go, that raises another issue of platform, because that Nintendo would absolutely want that to be probably exclusive to Switch if they're going to lend out Monolith Soft to help with that. And whereas that is a series that was, it was a PlayStation game, and Square Enix might want to be like, no. Like that would be a hang up that would have to be ironed out, essentially, because that will be a hurdle to overcome. Is that the big platform question if Monolith Soft gets involved?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up regarding this that we didn't cover? Because that was all the patron questions we had.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if there was any more questions regarding it. I mean, we didn't really go into a lot of spoilery stuff, honestly. Overall, but yeah, there's a lot of really interesting, because Takahashi said something with the trailer that there's a lot of there's a lot of hints in the trailer about what they're doing, which that's kind of interesting. A lot of people have theory crafted like crazy online. There's a lot of gear. I was going to say there's a lot of gears floating into Xenoblade 3. The big one that I kind of noticed right away was the name of the countries. So it's Kiev's and Agnes. And in Xenogears, at the start of the game, there were two warring factions called Kislev and Ava. And so it's like, it's another K and an A. It's not like identical, but it's interesting. But in Xenogears, the two warring countries were kind of like overseen by a higher power or a higher country called Solaris, and they referred to them as lambs, surface-dwelling lambs. And Kev's and Agnes, Agnes is short for Agnus Dei, which means Lamb of God in Latin, and Kev's is Hebrew for lamb. So there's this really direct connection right there with sort of like the opening of what we can tell from Xenoblade 3, where there's like this very direct callback to Xenogears right there. And there's a lot of stuff I've seen, going into like all the other stuff about it. There's a lot of weird things, like the Taino says in the trailer, like at one point, he says like, they're not your friends anymore, they're his fuel, which is a very Zanza line from the end of Xenoblade 1. Where Zanza basically just shrugs off all the sentient life born on the Bionis. It's just, his food, basically fuel for him, which also trails back into Xenogears because there's a whole Soylent Green subplot within Xenogears and like what the main baddie of that game is doing, which is it's an interplanetary invasion system that's crashed and is basically repairing itself by creating biological life so that it can absorb it to repair itself, which also kind of was what Zanza was doing, more or less. So that's what Ether is. So there's a lot of gears seeping in to Blade. I would even argue that the main character Noah looks a little bit like Faye. He's got the ponytail, and I feel like even though there's Tanaka's art for Faye and it's Saito's art for Noah, they have a very similar, like almost the scowl, the key art is almost identical there as the expression they're both giving between Faye and Noah. So there's a lot of weird stuff like that. One thing I saw that was kind of interesting is some people were talking about Noah's sword, his Monado or whatever. And on every sword, you can actually look at this in all the official released artwork. There's a weird Ouroboros symbol on every single weapon in the game. And like it fills up almost like a ring. Like when it's purple, it's full. And you see it on the mechs as well. Like you see there's like this half filled up circular thing on a lot of the mechs they run by. And it seems like when it's filled up, that's when like the mechs are full of fuel or whatever, which I think also delves a little bit into what Uni said about like the blithering clocks in their eyes. So it's like, those are a lot of questions there about what that all means. And here's the weirdest thing. In Nintendo of America and Europe didn't translate, like they kind of translated the Xenoblade official Twitter tweets, but they didn't translate the ages because everyone in this game is 18 except for Mio, who's 19, which is interesting because Uni's High Entia, and High Entia are supposed to live like forever. Like if you remember the little kid Tilan in Future Connect, he's like this little, he's like a little like 10-year-old boy or whatever, and he's supposed to be like 50 or something like that, or 45 or something. And Melia is like 88 in Future Connect, by the way, which is weird. And her father, the really old guy, he's like 450 or something. So I'm like, it's really leading this big question of how far after 1 and 2 is 3. if Melly is still around and kicking, because you would think, yes, High Antia live a while, but they don't live forever, and they're definitely old looking by the time they get to 400, 500. So that's a big question right now I have for myself, is like, how long after this is this game, and why are all the characters specifically like 18, 19? Because like Lands is Machina, but he's only 18, which that's interesting. And again, Uni, the High Entia girl, is 18, even though she should be like 80. Yeah, Mio's interesting because she has like the same Blade Eater blade as Nia, but it's flipped upside down. So there's that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of this game, is what happened between Xenoblade 1 and 2 and 3 to get to this point where, Melia seemingly has one faction and Nia has another faction, and they're seemingly at war. What happened? And where are the characters who would technically be alive if this took place 300 years from when those games took place? Where's Pyra and Mithra? Where are some of the blades? One of the, that's could be a huge payoff, is when we find out, like, how did we get from Xenoblade 1 and 2 to 3? Could be a great payoff.
I think my guess is this: there's some sort of survival mechanic, like there's something that the characters need to do, something with the clocks, something with related to Ouroboros in general. So some mechanic that I'm guessing both sides have to do to stay alive, which leads into the whole beginning of the trailer, living to fight, fighting to live, which is actually a slogan from Xenosaga 1, by the way. Just to throw that one out there. But yeah, my guess is that there's something going on about these people are like, they have to do something. Like they have to either gather something or do some sort of resource to keep themselves alive. Another interesting one is Senna, the hammer girl, because she has a big core crystal, a big normal blue core crystal, and she has Bridget's hair. She has the hair tips of Bridget, and it's like, what's going on there? Because Bridget was just a normal blade
too, and kind of the same color too, a little bit. So
yeah.
And then the third character, what's his name, Taeon. We don't see a crystal, but he's covered up, so we don't really know. Yeah, but we kind of can assume maybe he is. And like the official translations of the worlds, like one was developed very mechanically, and the other was developed with like magic and ether. So it's like, how is that going to play into this conflict that seemingly, and this is something that Roger's Base, another YouTuber, brought up when we were doing a video. The flute that Noah's playing, I think is. And you might remember the first time we see it, is it black?
He's playing a black flute with like Zanza symbols on it.
Yeah.
And then at another point in the trailer, he's actually flipped his flute, where Mio's playing his flute and he's playing her flute.
Yeah. So at one point, like Mio and Noah maybe come to an understanding and flip flutes somehow.
Yeah.
Because they're both off-seers, like that's their title, is off-seer. Yeah. And then they're both off-seers for their respective worlds, basically.
I'm guessing. Here's my biggest, deepest big brain is that this is a lot of fallout from the conduit leaving the universe, or possibly reappearing. If you go by the Siren model kit, yes, there is lore critical to the Xenoblade series on the box of the Siren model kit that they made for Xenoblade 2, which, by the way, literally repeats the exact same origin story of Xenogears and Xenosaga, now officially for Blade. I think my big brain is that Conduit's gone. Now they're in some sort of energy crisis or life crisis, where they need something to basically keep themselves alive. And in Xenoblade's universe, and in really all the Xeno universes, ether, the substance, it is siphoned from some other higher dimension through the conduit, through the Zohar. Zohar leaves at the end of Xenoblade 2. So now they're probably in some weird energy crisis to live, especially the blades, because Pyra, Mithra, Malus, and Alvis, spoilers, They're directly actually powered by the conduit, where the other blades just accumulate data and send that data back to Pyra, Mithra, and Malus. That's what their job was supposed to do. But what powers the their special core crystals in the shape of Zohar is the Zohar, or the conduit, or if you're in Japan, it's the gate. So my guess is that this is sort of like they're just basically going to probably make an interesting parallel to real world dynamics, where it's like, hey, war of resources. One country kind of like is like, basically it's two desperate nations fighting over resources to live. And that's what's basically going to be the crux of this game, which is obviously a very Xeno style way of doing it. But my big brain is that you're either going to need to find the conduit in the game, or the conduit is the reason all these worlds have merged. Because in the model kit, they actually describe the reason they put the conduit up on the Radamanthus beanstalk at the end of Xenoblade 2 in low orbit was because they said if they activated it on the ground, it could have catastrophic consequences, if they tried to merge two worlds together at the same time. It's basically like, imagine time traveling to the same point in time, but you basically merge into a wall or a building that wasn't there before. So I'm going to guess maybe something like that happened. They found another conduit, or the conduit ended up on Earth or on some landmass, and someone activated it, and all the worlds just smushed together. Which is why you see Uriah cut in half, which is really sad, obviously, for fans of 2. But that's my big brain. And what I think's going to happen is the conduit is going to need to make Klaus again. Because in Xenogears, the whole point of the Zohar is it keeps reincarnating Faye, because it needs Faye to basically turn it on. It's like it needs his genetic thumbprint, basically. So my big brain is that there's going to be some weird thing where they need to basically reincarnate Klaus so he can open the conduit and send whatever wave existence being inside it. Because that's the whole plot of all the Xeno games, is that the Zohar is a machine. It trapped a fifth dimensional being inside of it. It wants to go home. Can't go home unless someone turns it on. But you need to have a special someone to turn it on. Like, you need someone's thumbprint. And in Xenogears, it was keep reincarnating Faye till I can get him to open the Zohar, let me go home. I'm going to guess the same thing's going to happen similarly with the conduit. And I'm going to guess because Klaus is the one who turned the thing on at the end, as you see in Xenoblade 1 and 2, there's going to be some plot relevant thing about getting Klaus or a reincarnation or a clone of Klaus or something. Because that's the weird thing about the characters. Mio looks like a reincarnation of Nia. Senna feels like a reincarnation of Bridget in some way. I keep wanting to say Taino, but I don't think it's Taino. It's Tyon. Yeah. He looks kind of like Akos from 2. Kind of. Maybe it's just the glasses. But yeah, there's a lot of these characters kind of look a lot like previous entities and they're not supposed to be the same ones. So I'm wondering if reincarnation is actually a big thing too in all the Xeno games in some way, shape, or form. So I'm wondering if I think it's all going to lead back to you're going to need some weird ending, because Gears basically ends with Faye. He finally comes in contact with the Zohar, and he lets the wave existence go home, and then him and Ellie go, they get free, they come home, kind of thing. It's all leading to that, basically. Or it's going to go more a saga. I'm guessing from what we've seen with the whole countries are named after lambs, yada, yada. I'm going it's more leaning into a Gears style conclusion. It could end into a Xenosaga style conclusion, which is a little different, which is more or less just like, hey, I like existing. Please don't reset the universe because I really like being alive. And if we reset the universe, we all go away. So that's very boiled down to what Xenosaga is all about, mostly. Just nutshell that Xenosaga is about our universe is part of a lower domain, and if you get too many wayward souls who can't move on, it basically will cause the lower domain to crumble, which causes the higher domain to fall down, and basically the entire all known existence will just cease to exist. So they constantly, perpetually restart the universe. in a cycle nature, which Zanza kind of also insinuates in Xenoblade 1. But there seems to be a lot of gears. I'm seeing a lot of gears in Xenoblade 3. And I kind of think that's where it's going. I think Takahashi is trying to perfect his work. If you know, a fun little there's a little Xeno joke for all you.
Yeah, and one thing I've seen people speculate about, and I just don't see it, and it's a very like JRPG thing of like bring back the heroes. Like I don't think Shulk and Rex are gonna be in this. Maybe there'll be Easter eggs a little bit, but like I don't think a plot point is gonna be like resurrecting them. I think this takes place hundreds of years in whatever future this is. And I don't think we're gonna see, you know, Shulk and Rex make appearances. That's just my personal.
I think that brings up a really good question that you just kind of answered, which is like, what do you think is not going to be in the game? That's kind of people are throwing around. I don't think Rex is going to be in the game either. I don't think Shulk will be in. I think a reincarnation of Klaus might be. I do think we'll see probably Pyramithra. And maybe Alvis. Maybe. Hell, maybe even Malus. Maybe. That's a stretch.
I don't think we're gonna see any gacha mechanics of any kind. I don't think we're gonna see gacha. Unfortunately, we're just going off like this like first 2-minute trailer. I feel like the next deep dive we're gonna get is gonna answer a lot of these questions. But yeah, I don't think we're gonna get gacha in any way. But yeah, sorry.
Costumes. I was gonna say I think costumes was actually a really good question about like will we or won't we see this?
Yeah.
Or something like that. I think we're gonna see Poppy. And I think it's gonna be pretty depressing how that plays out. I don't see I see it happening and I don't see a good future for it, and I'm all here for it.
Yeah, we might see like a rundown Poppy who nobody cares about or is updated in 100 years. And it kind of reminds me of that Teen Titan episode with Cyborg, who was just in the Teen Titan tower just sitting there plugged in because he couldn't move. Something like that. But yeah, I could see that being very sad. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, are we going to see the Blades from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, who should all be immortal? You know, they should all be.
Well, they have Nia. My big question is, where's Dromark?
Yeah.
Like, if she's alive, he should be around too. And if he's not, I think that would be like this is terrible. I think that would be a fantastic way to sort of like lean the player towards one side or the other. If you see someone from Kev's murdering Dromark, you know, or he dies in service of protecting Nia. And then you're kind of like, because that's the one thing I think the advantage of having a combination of 2 games in the third game rather than in one game. And that is you build up an affinity for the characters, the races, the world of one in one. And then you build up an affinity for the characters, the world, the races of 2 in 2. And now here's 3. Now they're at war with each other. Now you're conflicted of which side do you personally side with?
Arc the Lad, Twilight of the Spirits vibes right there, where you play as 2 different factions throughout the game, and the big spoilers for Arc the Lad, that's the big finale, is you have to pick which side you want to fight, because you fight each other and you literally kill the other side. I mean, they don't perma-die as a spoiler, but like you at the time you are built up that like you are ending this team that you've spent dozens and dozens of hours with. Like you have to kill one of them. It's like, oh shit, like would they do something in this where you are, I think it's more likely that you are going to travel between the the 2 sides, and you will come to an understanding, and you will have members from both sides eventually within your party.
You see that in the trailer, really.
Yeah, they'll be rotating party members, I think, is how they're actually going to do it, would be my best guess. And it'll just be as the narrative dictates, like who should be in the party with you. But yeah, as you said, there's so many questions that this 2-minute trailer raises, and you know, it's very likely we're going to get like a deep dive at some point, like they've done what they did with 2.
I actually really like the fact that it's not known that this was going to be the way this was going to go. Because like when you talk about like Fire Emblem 3 Houses or other games, a lot of them, it's like you kind of know going into the game, hey, there's 2 warring factions and I'll see both sides of the equation. And it's like when
Oh
you
yeah.
play Three Houses from the beginning, you know you get to choose one, and you know you're probably going to do multiple playthroughs, so you're going to see both sides of it. Like, you didn't know that going in. We didn't know 10 years ago that there was going to be a Xenoblade 2, or there'd be a different universe, and then there was going to be a three-way after that, and then they're going to be at war with each other. So it's like you kind of had this sort of like false sense of security about,
Yeah.
you know, where the future is, because like Alvis in the ending of 1 is all like, oh, I can see the future, all life will walk together hand in hand, and you liar.
Like, that reminds me, because it's like Melia isn't a villain and Nia isn't a villain. Like, we like these characters and we don't want to see them. We don't want to see them fighting and potentially like maybe kill the other one or something like that. We never thought we would. Like if you told me in Xenoblade 2 that out of all the characters in that game, Nia was going to be like the one brought forward as like this main like leader character, I never would have believed it. But like, that's the reality of it. And that brings up something that I've seen online, and I don't think, I mean, maybe it'll happen where maybe we'll have a choice of like a prologue chapter, like where we can pick like one side and the other, and then like eventually it becomes the same thing.
Yeah, DLC, what's their Torna aspect here?
Yeah.
Will it be a well, here's the crazy thing, because my mind goes both ways. I feel like they could either go real Torna, and it's like, here's the DLC. It's set 500 years before 3.
Yeah.
Find out what happened to the cast of 2 or 1. You know, that could be crazy. Or like you said, it could be a weird prologue thing or an epilogue thing even, you know, or, you know, where it's like, okay, maybe see different futures or maybe an alternate future from the ending we get possibly. So there's some interesting possibilities I think 3 brings up, just, you know, even for doing a DLC campaign after it. I think there will be one, personally.
Yeah, I think there's going to be an expansion. And yeah, like the most interesting part to me isn't even like where the story is going to go in 3. It's what happened to get us to point 1 in 3. Like, what happened? Because I got very invested in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, and I want to know like that gap period of what happened. Because
man, that's the thing, is like, you really like the characters in both games. Like, Definitive kind of showed me a little bit about how Shulk focused Xenoblade 1 was, like, that I forgot like how inconsequential everyone in that party was to the overall plot except Shulk. And maybe Fiora, but like I kind of forgot about that a little bit, but I still like the characters a lot. You can't have a rainbow without Rhine. So, and I really like that, and I really like 2. So I'm really digging the sort of conflict, you know, that Monolith Soft brought up. I kind of wish other Nintendo franchises would do similar things. You know, plan this very long game of building up, you know, storylines and characters game by game without telling you that it's going to be, you know, in conflict in the future. And it kind of a little bit reminds me, and I don't know if you've ever spoken to him, but like Arlo had a really funny reaction to the trailer where he's just like, you guys get everything from Monolith Soft, and it's like, it's kind of true. And that's why I really love the company, because they really seem to care about the legacy and what they're building towards. And it's like Arlo kind of said, just like, it feels like Nintendo has these other franchises where it's like, if they don't sell it like super amazing, they're like, yeah, we'll get around to a sequel in like 15 years. Like, well, maybe, you know, it's like, yeah, I know, like, where, you know, I feel bad for the Pikmin fans. Like, yeah, where is your Pikmin 4? I don't know. Like, so yeah, that is kind of the thing that is like, we are in a sort of like, we're eating good. And, you know, I'm not taking that for granted. I'm really excited by what they're doing, because I love the fact that they planned this out. They didn't tell you whether they were doing it at all, but they're like, no, we sat down and thought, okay, we made some success off Xenoblade 1. And let's plan out a series where it's going to go from the get-go, you know, and not just have it just, you know, we'll like every game is possibly our last game kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's amazing because 1 was not always a sure thing outside of Japan for the longest time. It's how far it has come from the days of is it getting localized to now it is this long game they've been building up to this potential huge payoff, and it's really nice to see. Like, it's very earned from Monolith Soft with how much they've done.
And the thing is, that brings up a good point. Like, a lot of companies, like Nintendo's biggest sellers are like 30 million, 20 million. Xenoblade's never going to be that, but it's allowed to continue with the vision that Monolith Soft has.
Not with that attitude.
To satiate the fans. Obviously, I wanted to sell 20 million units, but the truth is, like, it's nowhere near Nintendo's top 10 best sellers. But Nintendo allows Monolith Soft. Yes, they have to help on Zelda and other franchises, but they're allowed to kind of do their own thing. That's like Xenoblade games are very unlike other Nintendo properties.
Yeah.
And I feel that's very important for
Yeah.
Nintendo. And Iwata, I think, knew that too. It's good to have that diversity, even if they're not selling 10 million copies each.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many, in Nintendo's past and many companies now, if a game doesn't sell a certain threshold, they'll just drop it, even if they had plans for a sequel. And Xenoblade 2 sold what, 2 million units, over 2 million units.
We're over two. We don't know what it is up to
know.
now. It's just over two.
Yeah, not an enormous amount, but I think it made profit. I think it did fine. Many other studios might have been like, you know what, let's do something else. But I'm glad that we've been able to get to this point.
Yeah, it's definitely earned, and we will very likely see at some point in the next few months more information about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and whether or not some of these ideas and theories that you and others have shared online, whether they will come to fruition. Also, very likely, we're just going to get like the first look at the battle system at some point. I'm just expecting sometime in the summer to get, sometime summer onward to get a more focused look on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, since there won't be an in-person events. Treehouse Live, probably.
Treehouse is coming at E3 time.
It's coming.
Around that time, what would be.
For sure.
And one thing that Nintendo, and we didn't talk about this, one thing that Nintendo Life reported is that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was rated in Australia. So I don't think it's going to get delayed. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
I told Mike about that earlier, actually, which, that's very interesting. It has something in its rating system, which, it's been rated already in Australia. That game's probably coming out in September. I think, first of all, it's already gone through a ratings board somewhere. It's kind of like done. But yes, there's strong themes, adult themes, strong violence, mild nudity, which 2 had as well. And what 2 didn't have that 3 has is very mild sex, as it's called. Now, Xenogears and Xenosaga both they're not erotic, they're not played up for titillation or anything, but they did have implied sex scenes in Xenogears and Xenosaga. I'm guessing 3 probably has something like that at some point. And they're all adults, they're all 18 and 19 years old. So if it is anyone in the main cast, they're all adults. But my guess is that it may not even be anyone from the main cast. It might just be like a flashback where they're just kind of like, hey, here's this character, met up with this, and then they had a child later on or something, like led to this character, like it's very mild. It was not explicit, it was not strong, but it was very mild, and it wasn't there for Xenoblade 2 on the same ratings board. So I'm just like, okay, so they're just going to imply some couple got together at some point. It's not going to be explicit. It's not going to be showy or anything. I expect it'll be handled much like Gears and Saga, where it's just kind of like, hey, you see characters wake up in the same bed. Yeah. You figure out the rest.
Yeah.
We will definitely see. But thank you, both of you, for joining me and sharing all of your insight into 3 and the general Xeno series. I imagine once we get that direct that covers this more, we might be back for seconds for that, for sure. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our patrons who submitted questions for this episode. If you're a $5 and up patron, you can submit questions for consideration for friend code. I'll make that post the week we are recording, so be on the lookout for that. Also have some shout outs for the month of February 2022. These are our biggest tier patrons. So shout outs to El Thanis, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, and Raymond Wheeler III. Shout out. Thank you so much. And before we sign off here, Simmons, for our listeners and viewers, if they want to follow you for more of your insight and your other content, where can they check you out?
I every Monday I stream a Monolith Soft game. I have Monolith Soft Mondays, and I'll be going into the Xeno Legacy, playing every game chronologically going forward. Not the DS one, and not Pied Piper for all you or Xenosaga freaks. For anyone who's that in depth into Xenosaga. But yes, at twitch.tv/assistmedoom. That's where I stream. I'm a variety streamer, but that's where you can find. But every Monday playing a Monolith Soft game. Been doing it for a couple of years now. And then YouTube, you can check me out at youtube.com/YoVideoGames, which is mostly an archival channel, but you'll get my reactions and thoughts there too on Xenoblade.
It's nice. And thank you, Stel, for joining us as well. And for everyone else, until next time, may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.